She is the Chief Executive Officer of the World Green Building Council. Jack Azaguri, he's the Group Chief Executive for Strategy and Consulting at Accenture, and Thomas Kiesling, who is the Chief Technology Officer for Siemens Smart Infrastructure. Really look forward to hearing from all of you on this very important topic. Now, why net zero buildings? All of you here, leaders in business and government and society, know the urgency to accelerate our journey to net zero. And many of you also know that most organizations are still not on track to hit their net zero targets and commitments. Now, the building sector accounts for almost 40% of the energy-related CO2 emissions. So it's important that we decarbonize this sector, and hence this conversation. And to also explore what's the role of digital technologies and AI in that acceleration. So thank you again for joining us. Let me first have a conversation with the panel for about 40-45 minutes, but would love to hear from all of you with your questions and feedback on the topic as well. So let's start with the big picture, Olivier. Why buildings, why digital, and why now?
Simple question. While building, you said it in your intro, number one, building represents close to 40% of the CO2 emission worldwide, so that's really a big stake for everyone. I'll mention at that point that it's not very well known, but inside buildings, 60% of CO2 emission are related to residential. So it's not only about large building, commercial building, it's both residential and non-residential. Second point, which is important about buildings, is 30% of CO2 emission are related to the embodied carbon emission, which are happening at the construction level with a lot of inefficiency, which are related to the material, but which means that those 30%, when it's done, and it's difficult to impact. 70% are the operational emission, on which you can act really along the life cycle. And why we are saying it's extremely important to look at building is not because of the size, but because there are a lot of things you can do now. And I'll come to that. But how you can do it? By leveraging technology, and you have a lot of people on that panel who are very familiar with those technology, you can really act quickly on your carbon emission. If you connect that with the net zero transition that we have all to achieve by 2050, we have to keep in mind, and we don't know what is the final number, but probably 50% of the existing building will be still there by 2050. So we can dream, and that was a lot of the public debate in the past years about how you create new green building, net zero building, and we have to do it. But it's also very important that we focus on existing building and how we can tackle those operational emissions. Now we have sufficient experience, and digital, which is your second question, has been a very strong enabler. When you combine building management and power management technology enabled by digital, and of course amplified even more by AI today, you can save up to 42% of this CO2 emission. So, as you know, every time when we talk about decarbonization, we talk about supply, probably 45% of the answer, demand, 55% of the answer. It's a combination of circularity, energy efficiency, and electrification of usage, but 42% only on the energy efficiency. And if the world would go through a trajectory of becoming green everywhere, renewable everywhere, those 40%, if we would have access to clean energy, will go up to 70%. Now, the challenge in front of us is if we want to be on track with a net zero transition, you have to save 5% every year, everywhere, on every single building. Some of them can go above, but that's not enough. So why now? It's very, very obvious. If we want really to have an impact on those 40% of CO2 emission in building, we have really to tackle immediately those operational emissions. Technology are available, but of course at the same time, and we can discuss later, we can implement those technology at the design stage when you create new building, because that will help definitely to make the operational stage more efficient. But my point to conclude is to say buildings are very important. We have to act very, very fast. Technology are available, and it's super important to focus on the retrofit of existing buildings.
Wonderful. Thank you, Olivier. Christina, so Olivier mentioned existing buildings, about 50% of those will still be in use by the time we get to 2050, right? So I want to talk about the retrofitting opportunity at the scale at which it is required. Now, at the World Green Building Council, you run one of the most sort of the largest and the most influential networks working in this space. So, what can mobilize change at large scale, including in retrofits?
Totally. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for the audience for joining us in this way forward. And I guess the answer for that influence is empathic collaboration, because there's a lot of roles of different actors in the value chain to access the opportunities to unlock the renovation rates at the rates we need them. It's not that it's not happening. The renovation rates in Europe are, let's say, 1% per year, and to meet Paris, the estimates are also that we need at least 3% per year of all that stock to be starting to get to that point. But hand in hand with that goes a topic that at this Davos is front and center, which is also tackling demand for energy. The energy efficiency conversation has been around for a long time, but now it's also part of the innovation agenda. And it's because also over 118 countries have signed that energy efficiency pledge. And that is fantastic, because this is bringing front and center, how do we tackle energy security, what we've heard this morning from global leaders, energy security, private sector competitiveness, and of course, tackling energy poverty for those that have it. When you say renovation rates, there's people behind that. There's people that are suffering in their homes from extreme heat or extreme cold. So it's around this obligation to giving access to data, to information, for people to also to understand what are the interventions they need to do in a cost-effective way. Because you cannot, old saying, manage what you don't measure. And AI and the data, let's say, imperative brings us to a way to understand the systems that will take us to improve the quality of living in those homes or around the world. But it also brings us the opportunity not to over-specify the solutions, because the problems comes when there's not the appropriate information, and then you over-specify or do an intervention that ends nowhere. So my answer to retrofit is bringing confidence to the market. Data brings confidence in several ways. One, there's governments now, and particularly cities, taking the lead on whole life carbon disclosures, because then they get the data to understand what's going on. Utilities have a lot of information also of the consumption patterns and what you can do, but sometimes from the master plans to introduce, they know how to tax us. They have that information, but we don't have access as consumers to understand fully that. So digitalization helps us intervene and access that information that is critical. But then we need a few things also to work for the retrofit revolution. The confidence goes around to understanding and grading. What is the energy performance certificate of that building? There's things that happen, but some countries don't follow through. It's like a little piece of paper that, so what? But then there's no follow-up for authorities to enforce that there's the performance to those standards. And the minimum energy performance standards in building regulations to achieve scale. And let's say, with the willing, because us as consumers won't change really if there's no true standards to step up to and disclose. So with those policy, let's say, signals which are coming, more front and center in a collaborative way with what we do at World GBC, flagging the opportunities, but also flagging the laggards, then we can have what is already happening at the EU level, like the one-stop shops for retrofit, where you as a consumer can understand, get your case, get the solutions, understand the incentives, and of course leverage the technology opportunities for that enhancement and that improvement, or hopefully the city to finance that incentive for that first step-up change. So it is happening, not at the scale we need, but with the sort of leaders and partners and governments stepping up to understanding that we need to reduce demand, but not keep people out of the conversation of being comfortable accessing what they need in an efficient way. I think we're on a track to really change the contribution of the building sector in this the imperative of decarbonization.
Thank you, Christina. Christina, you touched on data, the importance of data in all of that. That links to digital maturity of the buildings. Jack, I want to come to you and ask about how should organizations be thinking about digital maturity, and how do they make sure that their efforts are successful and impactful?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a very important topic. And as we know, the greenest megawatt hour is the one you don't spend. And I remember starting our smart building practice with the team 15, 20 years ago. And this thing was, I mean, there was no traction. And finally, in the last few years, was finally starting to see traction. And it's very much needed because the payback on investment is extremely short payback period, high return on investment, and as we said earlier, my colleagues here on the panel said, most companies are behind their goals for net zero. Technology is a key enabler. I mean, one of the challenges we had 15, 20 years ago, when an organization would come to us with sites, the effort, the connectivity, the data, the infrastructure to analyze the data was extremely expensive. All that has gone down. And when we look at the tech infrastructure, what the hyperscalers can do, cloud environments, the ability to capture data, process data at the edge and centrally, the AI capabilities, traditional AI, and now with Gen AI, the payback, the capability of technology is completely transformed. We went into with an organization that had 70 million square feet, 25% was connected. In a short period of time, we got them to 70%. That would not have been feasible just a few years ago. And so the journey towards data and automation is absolutely there. Now, I would say a lot of discussion, you cannot walk by 5 meters in Davos without AI being everywhere, and Gen AI in particular. I will say, let's not forget traditional AI. There's a lot of structured data, analytical data, all that traditional AI. We don't need the energy consumption that Gen AI requires. Now, Gen AI adds another layer here with unstructured data and the ability to produce synthetic data to drive simulations. When you look at asset plans, all those documents, it can help with the asset management and driving better accuracy with next best action. But I mean, there's tremendous potential here, and the technology is finally there. I mean, we deployed 3,000 meters across 20 of our buildings with the help of Schneider and Salesforce's cloud, sustainability cloud, and we manage that centrally. So the other thing is, when we look at the data and AI problem, there's a human component there as well, right? You want to take some of the expertise, centralize it, and let the AI really truly be an assistant to recommend and drive actions in each of the locations. So there's a big change management component as people let go of tasks to focus on high value analytics, making the decisions, and let the AI run the thing and pull some of this data centrally and leverage deeper expertise centrally versus, expertise in every single location. So there's the data and AI, the technology is finally here. Picking the right technology is absolutely critical, and the training, the education, we still have some way to go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jack. So technology is here at a better cost. Gen AI adds another layer, focus on people. Yeah. We want to double click on that AI piece. As you said, there's a lot of focus this year and interest this year in the potential of AI. Thomas, if I could ask you to speak to that potential and perhaps also give us a couple of examples of where you've deployed it and what success you've realized.
Yeah, so let's define what we mean by AI. What is AI, what is not AI, first, to get the layers right? And some of this was already mentioned. So really, most of what we do in commercial buildings and residential buildings today is static. We would ensure a certain temperature during the day, and then we switch off heating, cooling at night. Totally static, zero AI. The next level of intelligence would then be some kind of adaptability or dynamic behavior. So, if there is a low occupancy in a certain zone in a building, you want to switch off the lights, right? It's still not happening. Look at big cities at night. Lights are still on, right? After 25 years of talking about smart buildings, lights are still on. So some kind of simple adaptability. For example, you could also listen to a grid signal asking you to reduce your consumption because some peak capacity is reached on the grid edge of a utility. You subscribe to that service, you act. Some kind of adaptability. But these are simple rules, zero AI at this point in time. However, that creates the majority of savings in buildings already. Would we simply, with the data that's now available, with the IoT platforms that are out there, if we would simply connect these simple use cases. Now, going up the layers of intelligence, the next level would be forecasting. So, I could forecast the day-ahead energy trading price, and act as if I manage a fleet of buildings accordingly, bidding in certain capacities that I have as that fleet of buildings. For example, I can forecast my production curve if I have solar on the roof of commercial buildings, and then take the right decision with schedules, create a schedule for next day, for next couple of hours, to then manage and minimize my energy spending and squeeze out these efficiency savings. For that, I'm using regression models. They have been around for a long time. We're calling them AI these days. It's not really AI, but that's all right. If we implement that in addition, we squeeze out another couple of % of energy efficiency. And then comes the actual AI layer, which is machine learning. I can learn the comfort, preferences, and behavior of my tenants in a building and understand what temperature, what humidity, what shading, etc. I should do. When I do that, and that's machine learning models, I squeeze out still another couple of % of energy efficiency in these buildings. And then comes Gen AI, the recent wave, which is particularly useful in unstructured and badly structured data, so onboarding of buildings, brownfield, right? The existing buildings that we're all struggling with, is much cheaper, and that's going to create connectivity of the long tail of buildings. That's one of the big advantages I see from Gen AI, right? So if you put all these measures together, you can reap the 42, that was your number. We see between 20 and 50% of energy savings whenever we do these kind of retrofit projects. So, by the way, with payback periods of maybe 2 to 4 years these days, so it makes economic sense. We are in the money to do that. So really, if you're a real estate owner, real estate company, we should just go out, connect these IoT platforms that are available much cheaper than in the past, reach scale, and reach, and just realize these savings, which, by the way, will sort of, include more and more AI, machine learning, Gen AI, over time. But, what I would do is just work with a large IoT provider, to then to decarbonize your real estate fleet, because, the more AI it's going to come down the road, this will be included in these IoT platforms automatically.
If I could add, because it's a very good explanation of the layers. In the first few layers, we cannot underestimate. I mean, we see a lot of projects. Those first few layers where you're fixing the simple things, 1 to 3 months, there is still a lot there of low-hanging fruit.
That's it.
Sensors on the hot side of the building that are skewing the entire consumption of the building. The lights on 24/7. There is still a lot there, and the payback is often, we see in projects, less than 3 months.
So just double-clicking into, so now we have sort of, created the context that we should all go out, decarbonize our buildings, right? With or without AI. So just double-clicking into some of the recent developments of AI, which are very exciting. Some of them were already mentioned. We recently published about what we call GIBS, Grid Interconnected Interactive Buildings. If the utility knew the consumption profile and the production profile through storage or solar of a building, and the grid would actually steer the building, obviously maintaining the comfort level of the tenants and the commitments and all that. We have recently, published a research study which suggests that could save up to 5% of total grid updates that the US and Canada would have to spend in the next couple of years, which is like $12 billion per year, or whatever the number is. Why? Because it's much easier now to connect the grid edge systems of the utility with the building IoT systems at low cost. So we could get these savings almost, I wouldn't say for free, but for, at very low cost. And we should absolutely wrap our head around, that is not doable without AI, because now you intervene between the state of the grid and the grid edge and the building with its tenant requirements and the rest. For something like that, you actually need some serious machine learning and AI to do. Example number one. Example number two, if you give me the address of your real estate portfolio and I don't know anything else about it, just the address, I don't have the interval data, I don't have even the energy utility tariffs, I can tell you what the energy efficiency potential is for your whole fleet of buildings with a 15% max error rate. I can do that today. That was impossible 5 years ago. Couldn't even dream of that 10 years ago. Why is that? Because the data has become available. The utility tariffs are available through APIs. The addresses or the consumption profiles of typical buildings are available, so I can actually put them together and create a fleet-wide step function of this is the first 200 buildings that create the highest energy efficiency savings. Stuff like that actually needs serious AI. That's another example, right? And then the last example, then I'm done. Onboarding, we cannot overestimate the advantages of now being able to connect buildings, including the long tail of buildings, smaller buildings, the ones that were too expensive to connect with expert systems in the past, to reap these savings. Cannot overstate that. So we should all go out. Regulation is key here, right? To make sure that even that category of buildings has a requirement to decarbonize and to reap the energy efficiency. And for that, onboarding again, AI, Gen AI is perfect.
Thank you for that, Thomas, especially for those examples, the concrete examples. Anybody else who'd like to chime in on either AI, the role of AI, or retrofits?
Maybe I would add to that is super critical because the finance community is looking also for clarity in the data to be able to decarbonize their portfolios. If that sort of information is not available for the brown buildings, there's a little bit of a trend going on of some investors just selling off the assets that don't have the data, don't have the information, the hard work. And we need people to keep their buildings and decarbonize all of them. And that's the only way through AI that we will able to mine those old buildings that we have no material passports. We don't have any clue possibly on energy performance certificates or things that go in those buildings. So how do we get around the problem? It has to be in that way where we integrate these innovations in a way that we uplift every building, because the most sustainable and decarbonized building is the one that is already built. And we need to be able to put them all in a pathway of using less energy, retrofit them with low carbon materials and disclosure on transparency of impact, but also make sure that the regulation helps us in the whole life cycle thinking, that it's not just short-term investment, but that value proposition of how the payback comes around the quality of the retrofitting for 20 years on, thinking of the technology that is going to make that building still a great asset in 10 years now. So all the prop tech that is going into this, the innovations are exceptional. And it's really interesting because without that data, that won't happen, and that wave of change in this sector can accelerate through this collaboration.
Thank you, Christina. Olivier?
Maybe I'll add one point, and we've talked on purpose about retrofitting, which is very, very important, and a lot of good examples have been given. Now, what is very interesting also with AI, because on retrofitting you can do a lot even without AI already. AI is an accelerator, it's an amplifier, and that's great. When you look at new building, what is very, very interesting, people tend to believe that when you design properly a new building, you will be net zero. The reality of building is like a human body. It keeps on changing, the habits, the external environment, and so on and so forth. And I'll just tell you a story. Recently, we had last year we had our Capital Market Day, in London, and we were at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. For those of you who are from the UK and fan about soccer, it's a brand new stadium, and we had the chance, Schneider Electric, to design the entire infrastructure of the building, and it was opened just a few years ago. And the guy was telling us, thanks to the digital infrastructure amplified by AI that I have today, I continue to save 5 to 10% every year on my energy consumption. And he told us it was a big surprise he had, because in the initial assumption, they thought they will save a little bit. So what is very, very interesting, with all the technology that you have and amplified by AI, you can do a lot on existing building, but that's a must-have for new buildings if you want to keep on saving and deliver our net zero goals by 2050.
Well, thank you. Thomas? Yeah.
Just to add to that, the co-pilots, Gen AI-driven co-pilots will come out. A bunch of companies are working on that, startups, larger companies, for facility managers. And the job of a facility manager wasn't very data-driven and is still not data-driven at all. The reality of facility managers of fleets of buildings is many of them come to the office and don't really know what the highest impact actions are today that I could do. So I'm looking at some tickets that people have opened that the heating doesn't work. I'm overstating, obviously, right? But so Gen AI-driven copilots are going to be really relevant because they're going to use all the data, structured, unstructured, whatever, to then create performance management lists, and that's what you were alluding to. I really like the example, of proposing today, look at your fleet, and this is the 5 highest impact measures you could do to improve the energy efficiency or the operations of the building or whatever. And that Gen AI will make a big difference, I think.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, right now, one of the top factors, as you say, is the local facility managers. That is one of the top drivers of whether the building is running and energy efficient. And that's why a lot of the solutions now, you take that expertise, you centralize it across facilities and have higher expertise with AI as an assistant, and increasingly we'll have that Gen AI. I also mentioned you talked about maturity, and I do want to point out the research that was done with the World Economic Forum. There's a maturity model that I think is quite useful on the WEF site, and it talks all the way from the quality of the strategy up front to the measuring, monitoring, and the connectivity. And then can you get to a digital twin? Do you have the automation in place, the actual assets, and then the energy supply and to the building and the energy infrastructure that's actually supplying the building and goes through the data and the technology and so on. So a good framework that was developed in conjunction with the World Economic Forum, and it's out there. So just wanted to point that out.
Great, thank you. So many of you touched on people and jobs. Let's talk about the workforce needs of this sector. What should people be prepared for to find jobs in this space?
Well, look, I can give an example. It's obvious that for any kind of companies, you need to embed those capabilities to design the right solution for the future. I mean, we are an example. Siemens is another one. The point I want to touch is we are in an industry which is very fragmented. Usually between companies like us who provide technology and the end user, you have a lot of intermediaries. And for instance, if we speak about home for a minute, more and more the biggest challenge on the planet will not be the technology to reduce your energy consumption at home, will be to make sure that we can develop a network of partners. Because wherever you live in the world, if you want to touch your electrical installation, which is really your common center of your home, where you will control your energy, and you imagine that your home is going to evolve quite a lot. Because you have today an electrical panel in your home, very likely. Hopefully, you have no other option. Tomorrow, you might have an electrical vehicle. It will become the first source of energy consumption in your home. If you are in some part of the world, you will install solar panel, you will install batteries, and all of that will have to be connected. Now, I can bet today, if you go and see your traditional electrical contractor, he doesn't know how to handle all of that. So a big part of the work that we have to do is really to prepare those channels for the future, that they are not scared to touch IT technology, to integrate them together. We do it fairly well in large buildings today. You talked about facility management. Of course, any kind of large building has a facility manager. You have system integrator that can help you. But when you come to residential, that's an area where we'll have really to train the workforce to make it happen in the future.
Thank you, Olivier. Anybody else?
Well, there's the work of the IEA in their net zero scenarios. They always are measuring also the green transition, the just transition, and the job opportunities. And what is clear here is if the key mitigation measures here in that decarbonization scenario are energy efficiency and electrification, right, in terms of hitting the goals. There is the workforce, the traditional workforce. We will have to be able to engage with them to be able to do what you were saying, Olivier, being able to work at the home level to integrate this at scale at the same quality as we're seeing in other uses. So there's these, the idea of the one-stop shops where the consumer can go and see how can you actually engage with a contractor that understands all the subcontractors. And let's say that those pilots that are happening particularly well in Ireland and in Italy, Spain too, we can also make the integration with technology and make sure that we're creating those green jobs and that can trickle down. The Canadian Green Building Council has done great work also in reskilling for the transition. So those sorts of, let's say, opportunities. We have also, let's say, the duty to make sure that this trickles down in a way where we bring the job force with us, because there's the numbers are 100 million people around the world work in the sector. right? So we continue, and there can be at least 15 million from the early green transition, I think, from the scenario from the IA. I hope I remember the data correctly.
I would just to add, I mean, when we look at jobs overall in this AI revolution, almost 50% of the jobs are going to be automated or augmented. We're actually pretty optimistic about the new jobs that this will create. But in this industry, we have a dual change. There's the energy revolution and green transition and sustainability, and that requires training of the workforce. And then there's AI. And we talk about Gen AI being democratized. Let's not confuse that with we still need to train people, right? That facility manager that's now going to be equipped with an assistant still needs to learn prompt engineering, right? He needs to acquire new skills around analytics and how to, inquire, different aspects of the data to get to your better action. So we're going to see some jobs, be done 20, 30% more efficiently, but it creates an opportunity for high value tasks. All of this requires a transformation of the workforce and extensive training. And in this domain, again, it's new skill in sustainability and green technology, new skills in AI and technology, and getting everybody proficient to take this technology and be able to put it to use to drive actions, with a co-pilot and assistant by your side 24/7.
So preparing them for the twin transitions.
Correct.
Yeah. Thomas, would you like to add anything?
I think I see massive opportunity, whereas facility managers, operations managers would have a mechanical degree in the past. In the future, it's going to be mechanical. You still need to repair things, right? So it's important to have that skill. Mechanical and data. And that's exciting for millennials. There is a talent crunch in most developed geographies in that space of building management, building facility and operations management. And so whereas today a facility manager might be able to manage a few buildings, in the future it's going to be a fleet of 100, 200, 1,000 buildings. Because 50, 80% of tasks will be automated and are automatable. And that's what's going to happen, not only with AI, but with the more simpler use cases that I alluded to, because we just need to roll out these platforms now into the buildings. So I think there is an attractive future of running, operating, in a control center, right, fleets of buildings that are highly energy efficient. It's a very attractive, talent proposition.
Yeah, but if I may, going into the volume of where the opportunity is here in this retrofit economy we're building, if it's residential, there be beyond the tech, there's also the low tech. There's the opportunity to get right the basics of a sustainable building here, a sustainable house, which means we can help workers also beyond, for example, the opportunity of the heat pumps that now is the hot topic and it's in sales. It won't be enough if those homes are not insulated also, which is the low tech, right, properly. So it's the envelope first approach also when we go into residential. There has to be some sort of conversation and integration. When you go and do the evaluation, there has to be a holistic solution, because the homes, in particular where I come from, Colombia, and I went to London to live, and I was appalled in the quality of residential I could let out. It was really poor quality, draft. I would get sick in winter. And out of the blue, an angel investor came, and I found a flat, be efficient, that had a skilled person that understood how to put all the systems, and I can manage my data, my energy sitting here in Davos, and I can put down the thermostat. I can understand it has double glazing, and it has proper insulation and tech, and that makes wonders. And a good energy proficient energy provider. So it's also integrating that and also making it easier for consumers to understand what we understand and care about. So I think there's something there around us collaborating under this platform and with the WEF to bring that awareness. It's not complicated, and it just makes sense for our wallets, for our health, and for making people's lives better.
Right. So taking consumers along the journey
Totally.
as well. Olivia.
I'm converted.
Christina touched a very important point that maybe we have not covered yet. when you look at the construction industry, it's one of the most local and most fragmented industry in the world. So we use always those concepts of, a digital for large infrastructure and so on and so forth. But when you look at the building information modeling technologies, today you can really create a digital twin of your future building at the design stage, and that's how you can really prepare the life of that building. And those technologies are available today, but they're completely under leveraged. They are leveraged in some sector where you have critical infrastructure, large infrastructure, because of course the business case, and usually there is a bigger attention. For instance, we have a company, Schneider, which is called Aveva, which is really in the industrial software, and we see it's very, very advanced. But when you go to the pure building, we are really at the early stage of that. So whenever really at the early stage design, we leverage digital and AI technology, that will have a huge impact at the operational level in the future.
Thank you, Olivier. I want to come to your questions in, say, 3 to 5 minutes. But Olivier, another question for you. Let's talk about money that is required to retrofit, to invest in the tech infrastructure, to sort of help people prepared. Organizations that are early on in their decarbonization journeys may not quite understand the ROI or the financial benefits of decarbonizing. How would you approach that, and what's the business case that you found in your experience?
Well, look, Thomas touched it, and you can read any kind of study in the market on that topic. Average 3 years return investment, 2 to 4, depending on the type building. It's a proven business case. Now, I'll tell you a very good example. When you look at what happened during the crisis of energy last year in Europe, what is the fastest way, really, to decarbonize the planet or to save money was to reduce your energy consumption. You can reduce energy consumption by yourself, by deciding to reduce to by a certain number of degrees, or you can automate your home or your building, but home is a good example where you can save immediately, and it does not require a huge investment. So again, 2 to 4 years, best way is to reduce your energy consumption. If you automate, 2 to 4 years, 3 years being probably the right thing to have in mind. It requires an investment for sure.
And in developing countries, governments are more and more understanding. If they help people actually save and use less energy and water, for that case, a lot of geographies around the world are water scarce too, and water is energy, water is mobilized by energy, then they free up resources for families to invest in other things that they need, education, food, and actually, if we are in this intersection of what you were describing, of buildings becoming central to the energy transition conversation, buildings that are part of the energy system that are eventually grid responsive, then we are making space, as you said, for the governments to save money, not invest in that overexpansion of grids, bringing in renewables and electrification, getting fossil fuel out of homes. That will change the landscape of available fiscal resources to invest in things that matter. In the developing world, that is precious, because why are we giving citizens around the world homes that are overspecified and not understood and be designed by climate? And if you take it a step further, designed for resiliency. Now, climate change is here, the effects are here. They are suffering from extreme heat, extreme cold. So it has to start from the basics. Homes that are responsible, that are good for people in terms of their health, but also in the big macro picture, release funds for the fiscal to improve on other things, and then not necessarily overexpanding the electricity grid, because there's not going to be enough energy around for all this growth that is going to be happening. We're here this morning, the world economy is going to double in the next few years. Population is going to hit, I don't want to say how many billion, 10. That is, that cannot be without using more and more. We have to do less with more and way better.
Just an addendum to the discussion. Grid interactive buildings will help and can help to solve the problem of curtailment of renewable output, which is a massive problem in a number of countries. Without going into the mechanics, but the combination of a sort of utility scale battery and storage capabilities in building fleets, that combination allows to solve the curtailment problem to a large extent at least. So, and we will see that. Now this is in pilot phase. Yet another sort of aspect to resource efficiency in the whole energy grid, including buildings, coming from buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's hear from the audience. If you could put your hand up, we'll come find you. No. Yes. Yes, please introduce yourself. And yeah.
Nathalie Paradichev, I'm the CEO of Ivanhoe Cambridge, a major investor in real estate. We're the subsidiary of CDPQ. Christina, you quote 1% renovation ratio per year. I think it's a number which has not really increased over the years, at least since I've been involved in this real estate sector, which means 25 years or something like that. So we hear a lot about paybacks, a lot about opportunities. The reality is it's almost impossible to find lenders to finance retrofitting. Brown to green is something which is really good in terms of branding, but it's not happening, especially not in North America. So what could we do to make that happen if it's real, if it's actual, and that we have really solutions that were not there a few years ago? Because again, we are pushing very hard, and I think we are very well known to be very militant in this area, but we are very by ourselves.
Any other questions? Yes?
Thanks for the discussion. My name is Kees van der Spek. I'm working for Edge, so Natalie knows what we are doing. I was interested in what you said, that when you have an address, you know almost the energy supply of the building. How can we all together then, if we want to help North America and Europe to, let's say, increase the net zero buildings, how can we do that faster, that we really know, hey, that's 70 kilowatt hours per square meter, how can we downsize that? Do we have more data to immediately, let's say, attack those buildings and to make them much better and bring them to net zero? Is that a possibility? Is that where we are going to? Because you talked about 5 years ago we didn't know anything. What can we do in the next 5 years? Because probably we will arrive there.
Okay, so mobilizing funds and accelerating the data and sort of progress around it. Who'd like to comment? Thomas?
Can I? So innovative business models are important here. Energy as a service, I think, is one, where, and there's a bunch of providers, startups, large companies, 2 of them are sitting here, at least 2, no, 3 probably, 3, sitting on this panel, that are playing around with energy as a service models, where the provider would take the CapEx, work with an asset co, with a company that allows to apply these savings to fleets of buildings, because then you have the critical mass. It's not worth doing it with 1 or 2 buildings, and then build a model around providing the energy as a service back to the tenants or the operator owner of the building. So happy to engage on that and discuss. There's great pilots. There's a bunch of companies that are trying that, right? Because we're in the money, fundamentally. The savings have gone up because of the structural increases of energy price, utility prices, as you know. Solar is going down, storage costs going down. The IoT platforms are there. So the why now is very strong to create models like that. But happy to detail that further.
Well, look, I can give an example in that, in the same direction. We've tested recently for home in the UK a different financial model. So I'm not going to address the question, because here I'm talking for residential and for home, and we are testing the model. So we are proposing really to buy the solution as a service and not to have to invest in a hardware anymore. And we have been very, very surprised. It's an experimentation, to be very clear. We don't know if we will continue. We are testing. What was very, very interesting is you look at the persona and the profile of the people who have engaged in that experience. It's much more people from the next generation, younger people, while 95% of the people who are investing in home automation were usually about 40 years old, people who are already installing their life, they are buying their first apartment, and so on and so forth. So I'm not addressing the question of large building, real estate portfolio company, but even in home, by changing the model from CapEx to OpEx, you can really, really change the way of thinking, I would say, and adding new potential consumer for the future.
Yeah. And in 5 years, what's realistically possible with the potential of AI and new business models? And anybody would like to come in?
Yeah, I mean, the cost curve, I mean, we're in the first few innings or the first few quarters, depending on the sport you play, but of this AI transformation. I mean, this year has been a tremendous step forward, and yet we're only at the beginning. The power of what these models can do, the quality of the data is still not there. I mean, there's still a tremendous amount in this space, in every space, tremendous amount of unstructured data and structured data that has not been adequately addressed with the proper strategy and the proper classification and the proper context, and then embedded into models. So we've got a tremendous way to go. The technology keeps coming down. Moore's law is still very much with us. So whether it's connectivity, whether it's cloud platforms, whether it's Gen AI, the consumption, hopefully, I'm sure we'll see energy consumption on Gen AI come down over the next few years. But the power of these models and the ability to complement facilities management job and automate, augment their job, give them analytical capabilities that they couldn't dream of having today, I mean, it's tremendous. And the payback already, when we look at most ways to save a megawatt hour, energy efficiency, and this area is very much at the top of the list. And that cost equation is only going to get better over the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. There's some foundational work to be done on the data.
Correct. It's a journey going data, connectivity, cloud platform, and then traditional AI to advanced Gen AI. It's a journey, but companies are underway on this, and people need to have a strategy and a roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Thomas,
sort of address your question. If let's take an example from in the U.S. The combination of tax equity, increases from the IRA, rebate programs, utilities increasing their grid interactive service offers and the like, cheap IoT platforms, cheaper solar, higher utility tariffs, simply makes the case to do these projects, mostly in fleets of buildings, commercial fleets of buildings, be it office buildings, warehouses, educational facilities, medical and the like, retail, makes it very pervasive. So I think we should just do it, which is, present and talk about the projects that worked and what the IRRs, the ROIs actually were, and how we then finance those, right? And just communicate the examples and then go out and replicate it. I think that's where we really are. I think we can scale this up now.
And
I would go ahead.
Christina.
No. If you want to add to that.
No, I would add the importance of coalitions and partnerships in this area, and in many of the areas we're discussing here with technology at Davos, is absolutely critical. We do a lot of work with the WEF in net zero energy clusters, right, where companies come together and develop a plan within an energy cluster. There's over 20 clusters now deployed to solve the from all the way from the energy production to the consumptions integrated. We're seeing great examples with hydrogen. Hydrogen is perfect in a cluster environment. The offtake is all linked. The same with technology. The coalition, when we went and implemented our metering solution across 20 locations, partnership with energy giants like Schneider, with technology companies, those partnership and ecosystems are absolutely critical for companies to solve these broader problems.
Christina?
Yeah, I also wanted to go back to Natalie's question, because I was hearing, right, this conversation. I'm as frustrated as you, because I'm not a policymaker. I wish. But I think also the conversation around unlocking the renovation is around what is happening now, around that what we're measuring is real performance. So it's not, I think, and then the renovation, and we don't know. With real performance, we can also request clarity in the frameworks that make mandatory the energy performance certificate frameworks, to make sure that there is enforcement of minimum energy performance standards. If not, the buildings will not be renovated, the lights will go on, because humans are not in that journey. There has to be some enforcement for that to scale and happen, and that's the factor. If it's just left to chance or the right thing to do, it's not happening. Even with the renovation wave in Europe, the scale is not there. So that enforcement and the clarity of the direction of travel, that's why the directive on energy performance on buildings in Europe is so critical. It now has mandatory whole life carbon disclosure of data. A little bit too late for what we need, but that is on the horizon. So that real performance will give, hopefully, finance community greater clarity in how to invest and how to unlock all those benefits at a wider scale, because we're not at the scale we need.
Now, before we wrap, I want to ask each one of you for one key takeaway message for everybody here, business leaders who are trying to decarbonize and accelerate the decarbonization of buildings. Olivier?
Well, look, my simple advice is considering all the difficulty, the complexity and financing, you understand that we all understand you cannot do everything overnight, but we said it many times, make sure you get access to your data. And then you can decide based on that how much you want to invest, where, how fast. But the starting point is to make sure you understand the data. And once you understand your energy consumption, it's like in your personal life. Sometimes you want to be on diet, you want to lose a little bit after, Christmas. So whatever, what do you need? You need to measure. And that's the only way to progress.
Mm-hmm. Christina?
Yeah, I guess my invitation is to continue to be industry leaders and to continue to be radical in what you're committing to. I thank the panelists here are signatories of the Zero Carbon Buildings Commitment from World GBC. So it's decarbonization in what's in the remit by 2030. It is doable, it is an imperative, and with energy efficiency and electrification, we will be on the right track to unlock all this business opportunity in a way that can be data-driven, but also with the benefit of people at the heart of what we do.
Thank you. Thomas?
It's a call for action, which is if you're a real estate investor, a real estate owner, operator, a facility manager, go create a business case and push it, try it out. Decarbonize a few buildings, create a fleet view, and I'm positive that we're now able to scale this actually. The decarbonization of buildings at larger scale. Mm-hmm. That's a call for action.
Mm-hmm. Jack?
I would say that we've been in this smart building business for a long time, but the time is now. The importance of data is critical. Getting on a journey from analytics to traditional AI to Gen AI, sequentially, not in parallel, not sequentially, and then understanding the importance of people. The workforce will change. Tremendous training and education needs. The nature of the work will change. So let's ensure we have a plan for training and upskilling the workforce.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jack, Thomas, Christina, and Olivier, thank you for your time and insights. Jack, you talked about the need for coalitions. Thomas, you talked about the importance of communicating good examples. And I know that many of the panelists represented here are already collaborating on this and putting together Lighthouse examples of what smart, low-carbon buildings can look like. So for the audience here, I would recommend that you scan the QR code to get to some of these insights, some of these examples, to know more and get in touch with the panelists here. Also, Christina, the work that the councils are doing across the world speaks to the importance of coalitions. Mm-hmm. Thank you also to all of you for your time and attention and questions. We really look forward to continuing the conversation and collaboration with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.